for its violent land theft as mass graves of Indigenous children are being uncovered across the country. I'm Yunj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. The graves of at least 21 Indigenous children are believed to have been found in Grand Junction, Colorado. It would be the latest mass grave site discovered in land associated with former Indigenous boarding schools in the U.S. and Canada, forcing us to grapple with the dark part of our history that descendants are still mourning. Quote-unquote Indian boarding schools were first created in the 1800s by Christian missionaries to make Indigenous kids assimilate to a Eurocentric culture. They were, of course, rooted in racism. An American general who founded the Carlisle Indian Industrial School described its goal as to kill the Indian, save the man. By 1900, 3/4 of Indigenous children in the United States were enrolled in these boarding schools, and most of the nearly 400 known schools were run by the federal government, and about a third were run by the Catholic Church. For more than a century, these kids were forcibly taken from their families and stripped of their culture, language, and identity. They were forced to learn English and convert to Christianity, and many suffered other abuses, like confinement, sexual assault, neglect, and were beaten for speaking in their native language. Diseases often ravaged these schools, and a lot of the children did not survive. Survivors remember seeing fellow students buried in unmarked graves. Journalist and child of a boarding school survivor, Ruth H. Hopkins, tweeted in part, "The discovery of thousands of unmarked graves is just the beginning of the truth being revealed. The dead are crying out to be found." This is not some far-off history. It wasn't until 1978 that it became illegal to separate Indigenous families for these boarding schools. And these schools weren't just a means to whitewash American culture. They were a way to steal tribal lands, and as colonizers began expanding to the West, so did hundreds of assimilation boarding schools. Ben Rod, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe's tribal historic preservation officer, told High Country News that these children were hostages taken to pacify the leadership of tribes that would dare stand against U.S. expansion and manifest destiny. The federal government also cut into resources meant